I am Captain Logan, and this is day 268 of Spawn Year. Another issue stretched far beyond its substance. More blood and gore and torture designed to shock and dismay, and more easy story resolution through vague, undefined rules of the supernatural. How many times will I read and review the same comic book before I'm reduced to a witless vegetable? I'm desensitized to all this extreme violence. I will never again be remotely surprised by the sight of burst stomachs or writhing entrails. I have become so accustomed to these images that I often find it difficult to muster any empathy or concern for any of the people involved. Or perhaps that's only because those people so rarely evolve beyond wooden placeholders. Still, I feel hollow so much of the time, so disconnected and unfeeling, as if these comics have blackened my soul like a steak left on the grill too long. Oh, I try to mask the deadness inside with clever quips and pop culture references and silly nicknames for silly characters, but I'm finding it more and more difficult to pretend that I am deriving any joy from critiquing these ever-joyless, uninspired fantasies. They have their moments, but those diamonds in the rough only serve to make the rest of the rough that much rougher. It has been a good many days since I last saw Tiny Adam West, and although I drank a full 2-liter and I'm still feeling adequately nourished and strong even today, I'm careful not to expend copious amounts of power on frivollities, except when Spawn characters and items pop into my mind and I can't help but produce things out of thin air. But I'm getting the hang of it. That happens far less frequently than it used to. But since I now know that I can materialize anything associated with Spawn Year, I'm finding it increasingly difficult to curb the temptation to bring in TV and movies from my game room. When I was there, I could offset some of this relentlessly dark and hopeless stuff with something lighter, fun, and wholesome. To detox from all this despair now, I feel like I'm gonna need a whole year of the Andy Griffith Show or Dick Van Dyke. I need something almost sickeningly, nauseatingly sweet right now, dripping with sap, fluffy and soft and mushy and gooey. God, a year of Spawn might drive me to become a brony, but I'm delaying the inevitable. Let's get back to the latest installment of Spawn: The Dark Ages, or that comic that made Captain Logan dead inside. In this issue, Covenant gets thrown in a dungeon and he eats a rat. And that's pretty much what happens. Signed, Captain Logan. Alright, I'll elaborate just a bit. Last issue, when he killed that despicable human being we're only told about and never get to know, Blackguard, Covenant rescues a kid in chains who looked like he needed saving, but apparently didn't, for some reason. I guess he liked being enslaved by Blackguard, or he wasn't actually being oppressed at all. Who knows? Niles has been incredibly dodgy when it comes to explanations about who people are, why they're where they are, and what they do for a living. So this kid is mad at Covenant for killing his, dad, employer, uncle, babysitter, archery teacher, and sell Spawn out so he can suffer in an underground dungeon where he's told by another prisoner that the defects are held, whatever that means. He's also told that people are kidnapped right off the road and brought here, so it doesn't seem to be a government prison. Presumably, whatever condemnable organization Blackguard was with runs it, but we're never told what it's for, just that unspeakable torment happens there. We're shown a lot of that. This is a Spawn comic, and Spawn is forced to eat Blackguard. The point is to depict atrocities and provoke double takes and gag reflexes, not to explain them or thoughtfully explore ideas or develop characters around them. So as usual with this book lately, I don't really know what's going on. Death, agony, revenge, and survival are vaguely our themes this issue, with special emphasis on survival at the expense of personal values. Covenant, weak and mutilated, spends the whole issue looking at a rat and trying to remember what Cog told him about vermin in relation to hellspawns back when it made sense that Covenant would associate with Cog, and in one of those early issues Niles actually read. Covenant is delirious and not thinking straight, so it makes sense he's having difficulty focusing and remembering specific memories, but this does read a little silly. If Spawn were surrounded by rats while being tortured the whole issue and desperation sparked the significance of rats in his brain, okay, but the entire time he recalls Cog said something about rats, but he just can't put his finger on what it was. Really? It's not like he's trying to recall a single piece of minutia out of a whole college curriculum of Spawn studies. I shudder at the mere notion of studying this stuff in a classroom. Today's special guest lecturer, Tiny Adam West. Cog didn't tell him much. It seems like you'd remember creepy animals give spawns energy, but that's minor compared to how this whole scenario makes no sense. Covenant lost his necroplasm and is essentially immortal with a Grim Reaper face. Why would gleaning energy from vermin work at all? Maybe it has something to do with that ambiguous worm infestation that's never been mentioned since it happened. And Covenant has been extra feeble since he was remortalized. Remember how he was in intense agony before the crucifixion if someone would as much as poke him? So how does he go from having almost no body and entrails oozing all over the floor to being fully whole when that Marcellus kid gets to him? I know what you're thinking, it's all those rats, but at the end, he has to devour one in order to acquire its dark energy, and the narration says it gives him only a small surge of power. Jeez, these really are in the classic Spawn tradition. Either you skip an issue and you'd never know it, or the story is so nonsensical it feels like you missed something. I had to check the number from yesterday's issue just to make sure the trash can didn't jump ahead. Covenant's thought process is still all over the place, and not in a believable, he's desperate and hysterical and temporarily insane sort of way. He is lucid enough to weigh the morality and strategy of saving himself with evil energy, worried that Bulgy will see it as a win and he'll serve evil again, except he had about decided to go get his necroplasm back after this one last adventure last issue. I'm sorry, I'm giving too much credence to this trite by trying so hard to make sense of it. It's just a bunch of stuff that happens. Oh, and why suddenly a 2-page recounting of Covenant's past before he was a Spawn in the middle of an arc? Niles must have that Stan Lee mentality that every comic is someone's first. I hope this wasn't anybody's first comic. Likely, they're not still reading comics. Signed, Captain Logan.